Anybody talk to Charlie? Is he coming tonight? Is just not making it until the regular town board meeting?
I have not talked
Yeah,
to
neither
Charlie.
have I. So.
Maybe he's rowing himself here.
He could be, and obviously, I don't know if for the workshop we need legal. But it is 6:30, so I want to welcome everybody in the live audience and also watching it home on this rainy Thursday, November 21st, 2024, to the Town of Webster workshop. Tonight we have 3 scheduled agenda items, and the first agenda item is a presentation by Bridget Harvey, our Director of Communications, and Paul Adams, our Director of Finance, on the Spectrum/Charter One franchise fee revenue that the town gets annually. So I'll hand the baton to you guys.
All right. Yeah, we thought we would do just a quick review of the revenues that are related to the cable TV franchise access fees. Essentially, next slide. Essentially, we have the annual cable TV franchise fee. In the past, we've actually had some revenues from a franchise fee audit, and since the cable department is basically being wound down, we'll also have some revenues from the sale or auction of the assets. On the next slide, as you can see, the annual cable TV franchise fee. It's received annually from Charter One Communications, usually around March of each year. The amount received is based on cable subscribership in the town of Webster. Historical revenue data on this slide dates back to 1995. As you can see, in the 2000s, cable TV really took off, so did the revenue. I think last year we did about $520,000 in revenue. So, you know, it became popular in the 2000s, and believe it or not, it's still popular.
And I'll just mention before we go on to the next slide that this is unrelated to cable access television production and purely is based on subscribership, as Paul mentioned.
That is correct. So back in 2015, we actually had an audit performed by a firm called Troy and Banks. The result of the audit came in 2016, and they actually recovered $44,000. So basically, they took a look at the franchise fee agreement, compared it to what we were actually receiving, and detected any variances from the contractual arrangement. So it was a 50% contingency based contract. And we're actually looking to do this again. So actually on tonight's board slate of board resolutions, there's a resolution to move forward with Troy and Banks, since it's been about 8 years since they've done so. We think, based on what Troy and Banks is telling me, they think they would expect a pretty good recovery. But you never know until you take a look. So it is a 50% contingent fee contract. If they don't find anything, you don't pay anything. And they have had successful audits performed in some other jurisdictions, such as Salina, Arundecoit, and the city of Buffalo.
And as Paul mentioned earlier, with the wind down of cable access, assets that are not in use or that have reached the end of their useful life from this room in here, or the Spectrum building or cable studio over on Picture Parkway, will be assessed by experts from our IT department, as well as AV consultant, the AV consultant who we have partnered with to do quite a few things over the past year. So these assets include video equipment, microphones, furniture, etc. So what's next for us is nothing in terms of the annual franchise fee. As we mentioned, no action is needed for the receipt of that. As Paul mentioned, Town Board will consider a resolution to conduct a cable TV franchise audit with Troy and Banks. And then what's next is the assessment of those assets of the equipment that is being stored and has come out of the Spectrum building over on Picture Parkway, as well as the equipment in this room that has reached the end of its useful life for the town, or it's just no longer in use by us. So that's all. Are there any questions?
Where will this be, where will it be sold? Is there a certain auction, or how is it sold? I guess I need to talk into the microphone. How's it sold?
So I think that would be something that we discuss with likely Dan Agnew, who we've contracted with for AV services, who is more attuned to the AV, where something reliable would be in terms of auction or sale, and what the best way to get any return on that would be.
Understand. The last audit in 2015 was a 44,000 recovery. Here I go again. Was it 50% back then as well, so they found $88,000 and we got 44?
No, I believe they found 44 and we had to pay 22.
Oh, okay, I got it. Got it.
I think it also has a residual effect. If they find an issue with the contract, that will correct it going forward. So theoretically, your revenue should be higher each year going forward. So,
Well, I think it's a
worth
great
look.
opportunity. I mean, if there's no cash outlay to find money, I think it's a great opportunity. I'll be curious to see what happens, because in my opinion, as of late, it seems that cable is going down in lieu of streaming services, so it'll be interesting how much and if anything is found.
Yeah, certainly subscribership is trending down, but I think the prices have been raised, so the amount we
Yeah.
received has actually stayed pretty steady, which has shocked me. I mean, at some point, it's got to come down.
I don't want to disparage cable TV, Spectrum, Charter One, Time Warner, their predecessor. But I think in masters and business classes, they call it the death spiral. Has anybody ever heard of that?
Of course, I lived
I got some
through one.
people shaking their head in the crowd. What is happening in a lot of ways is that the Spectrum subscribers in Webster were at around 10,500 back in the 2015, 2018 range. In the fourth quarter, I think of 23, a year ago, they were around 7,700 subscribers. And that's what you mean by the streaming services and all that. It's not because the population is going down. People are going probably into streaming services and leaving the cable TV. But our revenue from the franchise agreement that was signed, who knows how many years ago, is 5% of the cable fee. Not 5% if you have Spectrum phone, not 5% if you have Spectrum internet connection. If you have cable TV through Spectrum, and anybody who has it, go and look at your monthly bill, you'll find on there the 5% fee. It's only tied to the cable TV portion. Well, subscribership has dropped 30%, but as many people know in the world, the cable TV fees have gone up significantly. So it's created a flat revenue for us, which is nice. I mean, we picked up $550,000 a year, but you just wonder, unless there's a resurgence of cable TV subscribers in years to come, I think the town board and our budget process has to get prepared for that number dwindling. One other thing I'll say about the assets that you had asked about, Jennifer, is that the cable building, cable studio you called it, Bridget, over on Picture Parkway,
Picture Park.
about 2,000 square feet that for, I think, 30-plus years, the town occupied, really at the pleasure of Charter One, Time Warner. We have emptied that whole 2,000 square feet out. In past board meetings, we have done resolutions to send things to disposal or recycle or whatever. So we have been picking away at this, I think a lot of the stuff that we're not sure whether we're gonna sell, donate, repurchase to other town departments is in the 3,000 square foot room that is behind the clock right there. So as Bridget said, we're trying to parse through that to make sure we know exactly what we got and what we could do with it, either from one of the other government departments or if it's best to sell it or what. So hopefully that gives some color to this.
Sounds good.
John or Jenny?
All set?
I have no questions. Great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Jenny.
you.
All right, we're a few minutes ahead. Russ, you ready to rock? All right. So our next item up tonight is Russ Ziskin, who is a citizen of the town of Webster, a very accomplished entrepreneurial business owner who has opened and sold many businesses, but is also the CEO of, what's the Clay once again?
Nova Ambulance.
Nova, Northern Onondaga Volunteer Ambulance in Clay, New York. And the reason why he is still in that position is he moved here about 10, 15 years ago from that area. Is that correct?
That's right.
And we have gotten the benefit of his subject matter expertise on ambulance EMS. And he has co-chaired for the last year plus with Councilman Cahill, who is the EMS ambulance liaison for the town board. So I can't thank Russ enough because it's all volunteer time on his part. I owe him. So you're up.
All right, so basically, over the last year or so, or at least since last December, we've been talking about what the long-term options for EMS would be. And recently, at previous meetings, we've talked about how we would produce a RFP, a request for proposal, and put it out to the local ambulance agencies to see if there were any ambulance agencies interested in responding to such proposal and be able to provide ambulance services to the town of Webster in lieu of the previous provider that is no longer in business. And so Monroe Ambulance and Penfield Ambulance originally responded to what we did as a pre-RFP questionnaire that we put out, just to get some basic information from the potential agencies that might respond, that would help us and inform us on how to write the RFP. And then we sent a formal RFP out in mid-October, and both Monroe Ambulance and Penfield Ambulance responded to that by the deadline of November 18th. And we have just received those, as today is the 21st. We got those a couple days ago, right about on the deadline. And so now the committee that I'm on with John Cahill will review those RFPs and give some feedback or recommendations to the board on what we have found in them, and if there's any further questions, we can go back and ask those as well, but that's where that process stands. And on the next slide, so one of the other things that we're asked to consider is, what about, since the town has the authority to operate an ambulance, which is not normal, most towns do not have that authority. The town of Webster does. What about letting the town operate an ambulance, build an ambulance service here internally with employees and own the ambulances and own a building? So we've looked at that, and one of the things that as Supervisor Flaherty has mentioned is, I'm the president and CEO and founder of an ambulance that's maybe a little bigger than the town of Webster would have. So I built it from the ground up. I know what it would take to build it, and I know what the costs would be. I try to translate the historical costs into what it would be in around 2024, and that's what you can see on the slides in front of you. You know, in other words, at the low end, you've got that one column that'll tell you that's about payroll would be about $2 million the first year. We'd have to buy about $1 million worth of ambulances and a facility that might be about $2 million if we were to get a facility that may be pre-existing on the high end, and that adds up to 5 million. Then you can see those numbers on the high end where payroll could go. Again, not knowing exactly what the ambulance revenue would be and what the ambulance need would be. We have a good idea, but not an exact need. And the ambulances on the 1 million column might have been more on the used side. On the 2.4 million, that would be on the newer side. And I'll give you folks an example. I just bought an ambulance about 2 weeks ago, empty, $216,000. Okay? Then you put a stretcher in it, and nowadays, if you've seen ambulance services, you've seen, the stretchers aren't the old days where you got a couple of hefty people lifting them. You push the button, it goes zzz, could lift up a 300 or 400 pound person, which is nice for our paramedics. It's not straining their backs. We can have older people who work, but those stretchers are $40,000 for the stretcher, and about $20,000 for the equipment in the ambulance that then sucks it in. Right? So that's about $60,000. And now a defibrillator, when I first started, from those of you who remember Roy and Johnny, those defibrillators used to be $2,000 or $3,000. Now we have very complex cardiac monitoring, defibrillation, things that, all kinds of extra equipment in that defibrillator that we didn't used to have, that measure oxygen levels and carbon dioxide levels. About $50,000 or $60,000 for one of those per ambulance. That's so an ambulance, a stretcher, and just that one piece of equipment, we're already up to about $250,000. So if you had to buy enough of those, which we assume, based on what I know what we might need here and what I do when it's the company I run, we need 4 to 6 ambulances. So you're up at about $2.5 million to fully outfit those ambulances here. Along with, if you had to buy a building, a small building, say 5, 6, 7,000 square feet, you may be at $5 million. We have a 15,000 square foot building. If I had to replace right now, would probably cost about $15 million, and $1 million, for 5,000 square feet. So you could see where, that range goes from 5 million to about 10 million to get into this business. And then the projected revenue there of about 2 to 3 million. That first year, obviously, that would be a problem. We'd need somewhere between 3 and 7 million, right? That would be the deficit. We'd need that money to get this thing going. And where would that money come from? Well, that would, obviously, it would have to come from somewhere. Taxes, donations, something, but it's a lot of money. I mean, you can see the asterisks. It talks about why, some of the payroll, that would include pensions, which is, hey, if the town had one, the one thing we wouldn't necessarily have trouble with is getting EMS providers. I have EMS providers. Boy, if they could get a pension, I'd probably lose them, right? Because we don't have that available in what we do, in any event. And the other variability on, why is there such a variance in the income of about $1 million, or, about 50% variance there, right? Is there's this thing called payer mix. Medicare pays so much, Medicaid pays so much, Medicaid pays so much, and then private insurance pays a bit more. You have to take into account what percentage of your people that you're taking to the hospital are Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance. We have an idea of what that is based on some numbers we got from the previous provider and the folks that are doing service for us now, but we can't be 100% sure. So it's a hard one to predict perfectly. In any event, the committee is recommending that that's not a great option for long-term for the town. So out of our job of looking at the RFPs and looking at potentially building it, as a person who's built it, we're recommending that's not a great option, based on, not only the numbers, but, the cost to run an ambulance, get it up and going is pretty high. The volatility in the EMS industry, it's one of the things is it's not very well supported in New York State. I think you went to a conference that talked about that.
Yes.
We're not even, as a paramedic, we're not considered essential workers in New York. If you can believe that. You know what that means to be considered essential workers in New York? It means the government funds you and guarantees that you're going to be there. We're not guaranteed. You as citizens of New York State are not guaranteed ambulance service. There's no laws, there's no regulations that guarantee that. And it's not getting any better. So if anybody wants to be legislatively involved, let me know. I can bring you on the team. Obviously, at this it's a bit small for the, you know, even though the town of Webster it's got a reasonable volume of ambulance calls. It's gonna probably be, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 maybe, you know, maybe 3,000 to 5,000. The economies of scale are just barely there at those numbers. You know, when you're doing 6,000 to 10,000, all right, now you got a reasonable business model. And that's, you know, one of the things as CEO and president, I look at the business model. It'd be very hard to sustain at that level. And you can't go out and make ambulance calls, not legally anyway, go around hitting people with cars, that's probably not the right way to do it. And, you know, the companies that have responded to the RFPs have significantly higher call volumes, and they can benefit from those economies of scale. And that last bullet goes sort of back to what I say in the controversies in the way the government is treating this. You know, we see the government pushing towards consolidation, and saying, well, ambulances should be run by counties, right? I don't know how they're going to do that and take all these private companies and make counties take them over, but that is where the push is going. And we've seen a lot of ambulances go out of business. I think in this county, we've seen more than half of them that existed 10, 20 years ago are no longer in existence. So for that reason, we're recommending, that's one thing we can recommend today is not do that, not start the ambulance business here, and look more towards outsourcing to the third parties to fulfill our ambulance needs.
Thanks, Russ. Any questions or comments from the board members?
My question doesn't really matter because I couldn't agree with you more that I don't think this is something, I certainly as a town board member, I have an appetite to pursue. And I guess I have two questions. One is, would it be fair to say, Russ, that you did start an ambulance service many years ago? If
Yeah.
it were today, I can assume that you might not jump into something like that?
Again, you know, if it was a 10,000 call
Right,
area,
yes,
potentially.
okay,
I mean, most of the ambulance services in New York State, the smaller ones are all 501c3 not-for-profit.
right.
So nobody, you know, I mean, guys, I'm not doing it, I don't make money, I'm not a stockholder and owner, and most of us aren't. So if you just wanted to, but if you needed to have an ongoing concern, a business that could be self-sustained, yeah, at about 10,000 calls, it would be a reasonable thing to consider.
Okay.
I think you'd have to be a little crazy, but you could.
That actually leads right into my next question, and that is, if this were a municipal service that the town were to start up and take over, we would not be a not-for-profit, and I don't think donations is something we could accept.
Well, true, but the other thing is that I can tell you the donation, us being a 501c3 is historical, and it is as for most of the ambulance companies. We haven't made, the last time that we did a fundraiser, we made $13,000 in net, and that was 20 years ago.
Right, but then
And that
again,
was when we used to be 100% donation base, when our budget was $60,000. Our budget last year was $6 million. So 13,000 is just, you know, it's not worth the effort, actually.
no, but also, if we were to exercise our CON as a municipal-owned ambulance service, we would not be able to accept donations, because it
No.
would be completely different than the not-for-profit.
Right, but again, I
Yes.
think, you know, if you were to, you know,
not
I
that
don't know,
we'd
maybe
live
the
on those.
township of Webster would, you know, maybe we'd be very donation friendly, but you wouldn't be able to know.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate the information, and it just confirms my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you also for your expertise, your knowledge, and the significant amount of hours that you have put into this endeavor
Oh,
over
no
the past
problem.
year.
Well, hopefully we'll have a good look at these RFPs and have some more feedback for you in the weeks, not months, but in the weeks to come.
Looking forward to that information.
Thanks, Russ.
All right.
All right. We are 12 minutes ahead, and I got, I see it queued up for McAlpin Industries, so you know what, we're gonna go with that. I wanna let Matt Chatfield know if we catch up on this 7:30 time slot, that presentation that you have for that public hearing, I'd like to do it at the workshop, all right? But Matt, you're up. Matt McAlpin is up.
Yeah, thank you. All right, good evening. And thank you, Town Board, for having us in. We're very excited to share some things that's going on with our company and our proposal for Publishers Parkway. So like Tom said, I'm Matt McAlpin. I'm the owner, president, and CEO of McAlpin Industries. With me here tonight, I have Darla Lacey, our Director of Finance. Joe Felici, our Director of Operations. Mark Lockerbie, who's our, what are you now? Just busting his chops. Mark recently retired. He was our CFO and now hired consultant. He's been very instrumental in what we're trying to accomplish here as well. Also with us is Sarah Kostic from Kostic Engineering. She's been helping us out with putting the proposal together. So before we get started on, I'd like to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. You can go to the next slide, please. So we are a precision sheet metal fabrication company. So for those of you that are not familiar with manufacturing, and in particular sheet metal fabrication, what that means is we bring in raw material, primarily steel. We bring it in sheet form, sometimes in a coil, sometimes as a tube. And we process it. We cut it, we form it, we fold it, we sometimes insert some hardware into it. We weld it, both manually and robotically. We do a lot of robotic welding. We send it out for finish, and then we assemble it. And everything we do is business to business. So it's not like you're gonna go to McAlpin Industries and buy one of our products, right? We don't sell anything directly to the consumer. But everybody in this room tonight has interacted with our products in some shape or form. So if you ever ridden on a high-speed train or an electric bus, or if you ever ordered anything online, that process of automation from the warehouse, from getting it on the shelf to your front door, we have a lot of parts that help out with that. And if you ever bought anything in a store and you used a self-checkout kiosk, we build a lot of the sheet metal components of that. So that's some of the industries and the type of parts we build. And Russ, I definitely would like to know how many sheet metal parts are in those beds, those hospital beds. That's $40,000 a stretcher. That's a market we gotta look into. So that's what we do. And who we are, we're a family-owned and operated third-generation company. My grandfather started it 60 years ago. We've been celebrating our 60th milestone this year. Grandpa went from the family dairy farm on Salt Road here in Webster to sheet metal fab, so some ties there to the town. We have quite a bit certifications within the company. I listed ISO 9001 here because most people are more familiar with that one. We are a veteran-owned small business. We're also a profit-sharing company. We formally introduced this program to our associates 7 years ago. And in a couple weeks, we're going to have our annual holiday luncheon where we're going to announce that we're paying profit sharing again for the 7th year in a row. We're very proud of that as well. Community involvement, we've been getting involved with a lot of local trade associations trying to build the welding trade within Western New York. We've been working a lot with RTMA. We've been working at the Rock With Your Hands events the last 3 years. And we've been working with local high schools. In fact, last week we were at Fairport High School, I believe, or Career Day. And tomorrow Joe's going to be at Webster High School to talk to a tech class. So we're trying to build interest in manufacturing early on. And then from a sustainability standpoint, we put our EcoVadis bronze score here. We are registered on EcoVadis. Company our size, you might be surprised to hear that we actually track our carbon footprint. A lot of companies our size don't do that, don't even know how to do that. So we do that. We're registered on EcoVadis. We're the bronze, which basically means we're in the top 35% of companies that are tracking their sustainability and how well they're doing with that. So that's who we are. The next slide, I did put a list of core values on here. I'm not going to go through them all, but this is really who we are. This is our company DNA. This is how we perform on a day-to-day basis. This is how we do our performance appraisals, and this is how we hire. We hire for culture first and skill set second. Okay, next slide, please. So why Webster? This is the property we're here to talk about tonight, Publishers Parkway. But we didn't throw a dart yesterday and found ourselves looking at Webster properties. This has been a long time coming, to say the least. First and foremost, I'm a lifelong resident of Webster. I grew up here. My wife and I are raising our kids here. Our kids are in the Webster schools. And we're both heavily involved in youth sports in the town. And I couldn't love the idea more of having our company in Webster as well. So how did we get here? About a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, our senior staff team was doing our annual strategic planning, and we quickly found that we needed more space. And when we took a look at all the facilities we're currently leasing, and when those leases are up and the growth we're expecting in the next couple of years, we needed more space. The next step, we took the opportunity to create a couple heat maps on where our associates are driving from to come to work, along with our key leadership. And along with a couple other variables, we narrowed it down we wanted to be east of the city, but not too far east. We need to be close to the thruway, and we need to be really close to a major highway. So we narrowed it down to 4 towns, and we talked to all 4 towns. And I was very happy with the response I got from Webster. I think one of my first calls was to Tom. Tom put me in contact with Matt Chatfield. We looked at a couple properties. Nothing really shook loose at the time. Then I had another deal going on with another property. That fell through, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I wouldn't be here if it did. But about 3 months ago, I sat down with Matt and Josh, and they brought up the map of Webster, and we just started looking at different properties, try to identify who owns it, and would that be a good fit for McAlpin Industries. So we found about 6 or 7 properties, and Mark and I had our homework to do. And at the end of the story, this one shook loose. So that's why we're here today. So I just wanted to give a background on that. All right, next slide. So this is the concept that Sarah's team helped us put together. And what you see here is the long-term proposal. So it's a total of 300,000 square feet. But the short term would be the initial need, which we think is going to be about 100 to 120,000 square feet. We're debating that internally right now. A couple things that we like about this property is we believe that the utilities are sufficient for what we need. We're in the process of putting our will service letters together, or the application for our will service letters. That's going pretty well so far. Also the area, it just seems like we fit there. We're a light manufacturing and warehousing company. Calvary Automation to the west occupies nearly 400,000 square feet. Mirror Show Management adjacent, 160,000 square feet. So it seems like it's a good fit for us to be right there in the middle. We've gotten a little bit of a chuckle between our team because this is right next to a football field and an ice skating rink. Our facility in Walworth, we share a building with a sports complex. And our facility in East Rochester, we share a building with pickleball courts. So maybe football and ice skating is the natural fit for us here. A couple other things that we think is a great fit here is this first initial building represents job growth about 20 to 25. These are going to be positions that have to do with robotic welding, programming, powder coat technicians, engineering, some pretty good jobs that we're going to be able to create there. One of the things that I talked about earlier about working with some of the high schools, our senior staff team continues to talk about bringing up that next generation. And welding has been the biggest need for us over the last 5 years, but we're starting to see a need in other areas within manufacturing, laser cutting, press brake forming. So we have a long-term plan, at least this is the dream, to put an education center together so that we can continue to teach these generations coming up about manufacturing. We think Webster's a great place for that, and being across from the high school, we feel like we have a lot to offer there. One thing you might notice on the top of the screen here, we left the northern portion of the property empty for now. We're leaving that undeveloped. Early discussions with the town, there is desire to develop that. I think one of the things I heard was a possibility of a new library someday. That's something that we're very interested in talking to the town about. We want to be a part of that. And more importantly, we want to develop a long-term relationship with the town of Webster. I had a chance to walk the property a couple weeks ago. Mark and I did with 2 environmental scientists. It was an interesting walk. I've never seen so much poison ivy in my life, but we got through it. But there's also a problem with the property where the ash trees are dead. And if they're not dead, they're dying. So that insect infestation that took over Western New York over the last 4 or 5 years, it's really hit this area pretty hard. But, our intention is to treat this facility like all our facilities. We take very good care of them. We like to keep a clean building. We're not the type of manufacturer that has equipment stored outside or materials that need to be stored outside. We like to keep a very clean building because it's important for our associates that when they drive to work, they can be proud of where they're working, impress our customers, and certainly our community. From a sustainability standpoint, this is something we look at all the time. Like I mentioned, we're one of few companies, especially at our size, that can track their carbon footprint. We're taking our sustainability efforts to the next level with our next facility. So we're actively researching geothermal heating. We're still trying to get our arms wrapped around that one, but solar energy is something we're taking a strong look at, as well as rainwater reclaim. So there's a lot of sustainability efforts going there. So with that being said, I'd like to answer any questions about what we put together in front of you today. And of course, I got Sarah here to answer some questions you might have for her as well.
I don't have any questions. I like what I hear. I am familiar with your company. I love the fact that you're coming home to Webster. I like what I hear on the education center, the sustainability, the future generations, which has obviously served your company for 3 generations. It's something that you live. And of all the plans that we have looked at for this property, this is the first one that really excites me.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're working with local high schools too. I think that's very important to bring the young kids up through learning the trades. I don't think we've put enough emphasis on the trades for generations in not only in the state but in the country. The only question I have is, have you worked with recruiting from BOCES at all?
We have,
Great.
yeah, and actually quite a few facilities, and still actively.
That's fantastic.
Well, I see in here that you are a veterans-owned small business as well, so I, thank you for that service. And how soon are you think to proceed with this project?
Great question. So ideally, as of right now, and that's one of the great things about our industry is the only constant is change, but as of right now, we believe we need to be in the new facility by mid-26 at the latest, yeah.
Because I know that we're in the process of doing our master plans, and I'm hoping that after, everything is settled and all the zoning and things like that is in place, and this will be perfect, and the timing, will be aligned with each other.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Jennifer?
I think everybody said it all. The other thing, I think a lot of, or at least a couple different senior living developments were considered for this space. I think this, as Patty said, is exciting. It fits with the use. It's not gonna have the traffic that a senior type of living, senior homes would have. I think it's great across the street from the high school. It's wonderful that you're from Webster. My son is in school for welding, so for that
that's
reason,
fantastic.
because it is a growing need. So it's exciting to hear that that's coming here, and who knows, maybe it can be an opportunity for him when he graduates.
Yeah, let me know when he graduates, please.
May.
Well,
May of 25.
I have to say, I'm biased because I know the McAlpin family. His grandfather, his grandmother and grandfather still live here in Webster. It was really one of my mentors growing up because my father and his grandfather were good friends. And the McAlpin name, the McAlpin Industries, they do things the right way. They always have. And it permeated down from Frank, his grandfather, right to his father, Ken, who was the second generation. And now it's with Matt, the third generation. I mean, the apples don't fall far from the tree. So I'm biased. I think this would be great. And what I really appreciated about Matt and the crew coming in a month or two ago is that I take it it's the dark orange is the first building.
Correct. Yep.
And that's the farthest, it's closest to 104, but the farthest, from Publishers Parkway. They had said, one, they were hoping that he could build this complex over 10 years where it wasn't seen from the road. But two, because of their other facilities that they have, and they mentioned a few of them, as certain things age out or leases are done, this is a 10-year plan to get their whole operation here. And they saw right from the beginning that we need to approach this with the board, planning board, zoning board, showing the full 10 years, and not just saying, hey, let's just show you this 100,000 square foot building in the far corner here. Because they do things the right way, and they totally understood that. They come back in 5 years for these other things, it's a totally different town board, totally different planning board, totally different zoning board, so. I'll get off the McAlpin soapbox,
I
Matt, but,
appreciate the kind words, Tom. You mentioned traffic earlier. That was one thing that we did take a close look at when we looked at the property, and, the majority of our associates' shift starts at 6 a.m., so, the timing of the traffic in that area will work out great.
yeah. And Ginny, I love your question, because I know that this was kind of like, let's have Matt and the crew come in and show this. And then I know that Josh and Matt Chatfield and Matt and the whole crew here have talked about, okay, based on questions, comments, thoughts, it's very possible that we'll be hitting town board, planning board, zoning board actions on this and all that goes into that within the next month or two. So that goes to your timing. You want to build a building and be in by mid-26, I got news for everybody. That's a year and a half away. So, thanks, Matt.
A lot can
Matt.
happen between now and then, too, so.
That's true.
We were just talking about, well, if we can get it done by the end of '25, we might have use for it, so. Keeping an open mind about it.
Sure, sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Matt Chatfield, do you think with 18 minutes to go, you could potentially zip through this? I'll let everybody know, we have done a resolution back on October 17th, I want to say, to do a letter of intent for applying to the Restore New York grant for the West Webster Hamlet and certain properties there. Certainly, one of the focal ones was, and is, 600 Ridge, the old furniture strippers. The deadline to apply for that grant is December 20th, and there is some public hearing aspects to this process, and Matt, I know we have a resolution to set a public hearing that's on tonight's regular board meeting agenda, but I know that you had said to Josh, you'd like to kind of give the board and the community to this presentation to kind of triage why.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll hand it to you.
Great, thank you. Matt Chatfield, Executive Director of the Webster Economic Development Alliance. Been working with the Alliance and Town of Webster, been working on West Webster for several years now. A solution to the blight caused by 600 Ridge Road for an extensive period of time, but we are making quite a bit of progress on that effort. And just to remind the board, the town was awarded some master planning funds from the Genesee Transportation Council back in 2022. That master plan was finished in 2023. Here's the study area. And the public sentiment that came out of that was we need to enhance safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. We need to improve the look and function of Empire Boulevard. But most importantly, we need to solve the problem with the corner of Gravel and Old Ridge Road. So tonight, real quickly, we're going to talk about the Restore New York grant program. There's a funding opportunity available for application to the town, and that funding window is going to close pretty soon. And we'll quickly talk about what we're hoping to accomplish. But, this is the timeline. And I'm not going to belabor this timeline, but just to show you, there's been an extensive amount of activity and milestones that have taken place since June of 2021. Heading through into, I would say, March of 2024, when the town was the beneficiary of the county foreclosure and now has title to 600 Ridge Road. So now it's the town's responsibility to figure out what to do with this. And we've been working diligently with internal town staff to try and find that solution. And one of the ideas that we have, and just speaks to the community demand, right, to see the blighting impacts of 600 Ridge Road, the community input, the heat map, the focus of most of the public comments for that master planning process were on the four-way intersection. So to talk about 600 Ridge, the state made an announcement back in September that this funding source was available. And in early November, the town actually sought a potential private partner to be the entity that would rehabilitate this structure, right? So the town would be able to secure the funding from the state and then could actually subgrant that onto a private sector entity. But the private sector entity would need to come up with the funds upfront and then would get reimbursed. Unfortunately, we had an underwhelming response from our development community to that opportunity. So absent a private sector developer, private sector investor to, cooperate with the town and potentially, seek to get under contract and help rehabilitate the property, we're left with a conundrum. We have a property that's in failing condition. We have a roof that is in failing condition. We have cost estimates for activities to just stabilize the structure that range from $12,000 and upwards of dollars that are difficult to have the public sector swallow at this point without knowing what the future of the building is. What happened? There we go. So the funding program will provide for engineering, design, demolition, construction, environmental remediation. We're hoping to mate a project that would help get this property prepared for future development. Most likely, it would entail a demolition of the structure. It would entail an expanded environmental investigations and then follow through with remedial activities to get the site prepared for new development. That's currently what we're hoping to propose to the state. So that would take place September, the December 20th is the application deadline. Quarter 1, quarter 2 of 2025 is the anticipated award notification. And the great thing about that date is that's like a milestone date. So from that point forward, expenses would be eligible. So at that point, the town would be able to move forward with any sort of activities, if need be, based on timing or need, and the extent of dilapidation of the building. And then those funds would be eligible to get reimbursed. And then hopefully, close out the project by the end of 2026. So why now? Continue. We still have momentum from the master planning process. The town is now finally in control of this building. The town was unsuccessful in round 7 of the Restore New York program, that the grant submission. I sat right in this chair probably 2 years ago. We submitted in January of 2023. But we didn't have a very good project put together because the town didn't have control, and there was no clear path to control at the time. We continue to have broad public support to deal with this structure. And the goal is to deal with the structure with outside assistance, right? Rather than having the town foot the bill, which is in the multiple tens of thousands, even just to demolish the building. Luckily, this particular program is now on actually a multi-annual funding round. It used to be every 3 years this program was eligible. The past 2 years, they've actually gone, quite a bit further, and now there's actually 2 funding rounds annually for the past 2 years. So if the town decides not to advance an application at this point, it's likely that midway through 2025, there may be another opportunity. And if it's unsuccessful at this point, there's going to be another opportunity in the future as well to apply again. So it's really no harm, no foul. Our hope, and we've been working with the ownership of 602 Ridge Road, Jade Palace, which is on the market for sale. We've been working with them in hopes that they could find a suitor that would buy that property and then potentially enjoin the town on a larger application that would impact that property as well. As of today's date, we don't have another developer that would be interested. That's actually under control of 602, which is the old Jade Palace Heritage House, for those of you who are predate my, my years here. So our best bet scenario is if we can get both properties within the same application. But as of currently right now, we're not anticipating being able to do that. So we have approximately, these are some ballpark numbers, we have about a $275,000 total project, which includes some contingencies and a bunch of engineering and investigations and probably a remedial action plan, like assuming the next steps to solve the environmental impairment. So right now, the anticipated restore request would be for $250,000 with, approximately 10% or $25,000 to $27,000 of matching funds that would be required by the town. Just some additional pictures. I think everybody knows what the building looks like. Jade Palace property, a theoretical rehabilitation of that property, soup to nuts, including site work, $2.3 million. Theoretical, if we could find a suitor for that, would be a $700,000 ask. Town is eligible to ask for up to $1 million from the state. So this is definitely part of a prolonged effort, sustained effort by the town of Webster to facilitate growth and revitalization of the hamlet. The planning study, there's still multiple steps that the town can take to continue build upon that momentum, especially the recommended zoning changes. Streetscape improvements, I sat here a year ago when we applied for TAP grant, which is Transportation Alternatives Program funding through the federal government via, I wouldn't say a loophole, but I would say an outlier. Our application was denied. We actually interviewed the Federal Transportation Committee that scored our application, and they said it was really a silly thing, and they encouraged us to apply again. So the town's in a great position to apply again for streetscape, sidewalk, and funding for that area. And then, of course, continued investigations for Ridge Road. So there's still a lot of things that the town can be doing, even absent the award of these funds, to continue making progress, and with not a lot of dollars spent, right? We're talking about, $100,000 to continue to push the revitalization of this neighborhood. Just some renderings from just to remind you of what those streetscape projects would potentially look like. So, in potential sources of funding for the project, town budgets, maybe squeeze a couple dollars of ARPA funds out of the budget. I know it's going fast, but there's just a little bit can go a very long way in the hamlet. And of course, some private investment. And I know that Josh and his team are looking diligently at other federal sources of funding as well. So with that, if there's any particular questions, I'd be happy to answer. Did I meet your timeline, sir?
You did
Very
great.
close. Okay.
Matt, what's the structural condition of 602 Ridge Road, not 600?
So of 602?
Yes, Jade Palace.
There has been no engineer's assessment of the structural integrity of that building. I've walked through it several times. I've walked through the basement of the building several times. I believe the building is very salvageable, but the quality of the structure is difficult to match with what the market is looking for, right? The ceiling heights are low, right? There's a lot of columns and walls that are all structurally bearing. It would take someone with a great vision, and I'm not saying it's not worth trying to rehab that structure. Built in 1885, it's a very old building. There's always been a pub or a tavern on that corner since like the 1860s. So
Right.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be worthwhile. It just takes a special person be able to
Right, and a lot of
stop
those times, because that building is that old, when they start doing rehab and, tearing down walls, they run into all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I mean, the building's been cut up pretty good over the years.
Right.
Yeah.
Last time it was in 600 Ridge Road. Walked through the basement upstairs. Honest to God, I don't see the worth in shoring that up at all. And I was pretty surprised by the cost of your cost estimate to demo that.
Oh,
At
that's just,
$150,000.
that includes site work, utility work. There's a little bit of fluff there for the application.
How much so far did the grants we got for this hamlet?
Currently, to my knowledge, the town does not have any grant funds towards 600 Ridge Road.
Nothing?
We are seeking our first victory.
Also, 600, would that possible if we demolish it and make it into like a, community park or something?
So the master plan contemplated two alternatives for that corner. The parcel is pretty much a postage stamp right now. So the vision of what you could accomplish with a public space wasn't really flushed out in the master plan. I think the master plan preferred to see some sort of structure on that corner to keep the village, urban, hamlet character of that intersection. Whether or not it's a new building or that existing building, but
Like a gazebo or
having
something?
it be a vacant, I think right now, having it be an open public space, absent a better response from the marketplace, I think the town would be doing more to try and keep people from parking cars in there, or I think it would become more of a headache, I'll be honest, if it was a vacant lot.
No, it's not vacant, but, like a
so-
place where
Yeah.
people just come and sit and.
The town owns the property, so the town is very much able to, take another stab at what it wants to accomplish with that corner.
Jennifer?
No, thank you for that.
Thanks,
I
Matt.
don't know why we wouldn't apply.
Right.
Or I don't know why we would pass on this application timeline and wait for the next one. Let's apply and keep it moving forward.
Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So Bridget, that was fantastic. We take a couple-minute break, we shut down the workshop now, and we come back in a few minutes and start the regular town board meeting. So that concludes our town board workshop for the evening. Thank you. We'll be back on the air in 3 to 5 minutes to start the regular.